Hey guys, welcome back to another story time, and I've got to put out a few warnings real quick. This story that I'm about to tell is very difficult for me to put out, and for some of you, it may be slightly bothering. So I'm going to tell you now, if you don't do well with blood and guts, not really blood and guts, but descriptions of injuries, um, I would ask you to click off the video. This video is going to be totally unscripted, as most of my videos are. I'm going to get a little more comfortable here for a second, because, like I said, this video is going to be totally unscripted, and it may be bothering. I will not use any of the individuals who were involved in this real names. I will come up with pseudonyms on the fly. For those of you who are watching who were involved in this, I want to tell you how incredibly grateful I am that you all stepped up and assisted me in probably one of the worst workplace accidents I've ever seen. You guys are the heroes of this. I'm just the medic, and I'm just the storyteller on this one. You guys were the real heroes. And for that, I am eternally grateful, because that day we pulled together as a team. And because of you guys, that gentleman is alive. There's one more individual I would like to address. He's no longer with us. He obviously is, he's still alive, but he no longer works with us. And I'd like to take a moment to address him and say that the support that he and his colleagues have given me over the years have made the biggest difference in my life, and I appreciate that. So, on with the story. All right, here we go. So, I was at one of my stations, and I was working doing some random stuff, and I hear a loud crash. And, you know, in the industry that I work in, hearing things bang around and crash around, it's not really that odd. And then all of a sudden I start to see everyone running towards it, and then one of the people who had run towards it ran backwards, screaming, "No, no, no." That got my attention very quickly, and I got over to the site as quickly as possible. And what I found was them pulling a 3,500 pound, roughly, that's what I'm guesstimating it at, pound beam off of a gentleman. He had a broken wrist, and blood was leaking very profusely. It was very obviously an arterial bleed. And he was lying on the ground, and by about that time, he had about a liter of blood on the ground. So I immediately stabilized his head and neck, and I grabbed one of my other individuals, and I told them that we needed to shut down this bleeding as quickly as possible, otherwise he was going to bleed out. He was alert, and he was awake. Well, I can say he was awake. He wasn't alert. Sorry. He was awake, and you have to understand that all of this is going on so quickly that time slows down, for me at least. thankfully, one of my other colleagues, we're going to call him Brian, and you know who you are, got over to me and immediately looked at me and said, "I've got his neck. Go get what you need." I didn't have my bag with me. I yelled at one of my buddies who was there as well, "Hey, get my bag, get it now, and bring me a neck brace." And ironically enough, we had just gotten those neck braces in. So we were shutting down bleeding and we were controlling the head and neck. And to be honest, I'll be blunt with you and say that this guy was dying in front of us. That's the truth. And I have a lot of decisions to make very quickly because, number one, he's losing a lot of blood and I don't know where it's coming from. But I was able to see inside of his shirt, and remember, this happened in the space of 2 minutes, but it feels like an eternity for me. And I could see that he had a very large bruise across his chest. And that tells me, okay, we have internal bleeding. Okay, well, since we have this internal bleeding, we know that most likely the blood is coming from below the bruise because he was laying on the ground. What we didn't know at the time was that we knew that he had a broken pelvis. Okay. What we didn't know is that part of that broken pelvis had punctured the femoral artery. Okay. But I know he's bleeding internally, and I know he's bleeding into his chest. He's also going into shock. So I make a decision at this point to not raise the legs because I don't want to force any more blood into the chest cavity and also to make it, leave the body any quicker. It took EMS 8 minutes to get there. The femoral artery bleeds out in roughly 3. My buddy gets back with my bag. We get a neck brace on the gentleman. I start, grabbing gauze as much as I can just to pack this wound, but it's an open fracture on his wrist. This is very hard to pack that wound. So we made a decision that we needed to basically apply pressure and get it above his heart. It still wasn't slowing. So I had to ask another friend of mine, we're going to call him George. And, to let y'all know, in this very tragic situation, George is absolutely comic relief. And anybody out there who knows George by name, you know exactly that he could be one of the toughest guys you'll ever meet. But he can also be incredibly funny. And on his own stupid whims too. But I tell him, hey, I need more gauze and I need it now. And he says to me, where is it? And I said, hey, it's in one of the first aid kits. Go. Unbeknownst to George, there is a first aid kit roughly 30 feet from him. So he runs across the entire shop. Now, again, I made the point that George is one of the toughest guys you'll ever meet. He grabs the entire first aid cabinet off of a concrete wall, tears it off, and runs the entire cabinet back over to me, diving over to me. I immediately open it up, and I was able to get more gauze very quickly. Of course, by this time, George is very winded. is just on the ground breathing hard. Um, my safety manager, is there by me at that point, and he says to me, "What do you need me to do?" Now, by this point, 911 has been called. I forgot to point that out. I said, when the ambulance gets here, you need to back them in. You need to get them into the shop as quickly as possible. So he goes and waits by the bay door. Again, we are trying to keep this gentleman calm, and we are trying to keep him still because he's out of it and he's conscious but not alert, and he's fading pretty quickly. And I remember getting a blood pressure that was extremely low, very low. Well, EMS gets there and we get them backed in, and once we get them over there, they start assessing the patient. I relay everything. And eventually, he's taken out with a broken pelvis, a broken wrist, a severed femoral artery, and head injuries. That's what I know happened. I don't know anything else. As far as injuries go, I can tell you what I saw. So then we start the cleanup process, and honestly, Kim, one of our HR people, I had never expected her to step up in the way she did. She volunteers to clean up the entire area. And she was the one holding pressure on this guy's arm to keep him from bleeding out. At least that's the way I remember it. Brian stepped up. Kim stepped up. All these guys stepped up to make this happen, and they don't realize just how close to death this man was. But I can tell you, he was very, very close. This whole scene afterwards, there was roughly 2 liters of blood on the ground. And I had to do a little bit of counseling with people that had seen this, and they didn't know how to handle seeing something like this. And honestly, it changed the dynamics of our shop forever. And that's fantastic. A lot of people think, yeah, this is a horrible tragedy, and it is. But seeing that those people stepped up brought us closer together as an emergency response team. And I will forever know that I can count on them when something really bad hits the fan. I may not be able to count on anybody else, but I know for a fact I can count on them. And they know that they can count on me to get it done too. The story is not really that graphic. And so I guess it's relatively okay for pretty much everybody. But I was just concerned that some people would have a problem with the blood and everything like that. That man is alive today because of those people that stepped up. That's all I really want to say in this story is that, we have so many industries that they teach basic first aid. And when everything hits the fan, they don't know what to do. So I feel like that we need better training. It's only because, you know, a certain select group of people that had the training in my industry stepped up. That man is alive. And Kim, she got a trial by fire because she had never seen anything like that, but I guarantee you she can handle it now. And I'm proud of her for that. She helped save a life, and so did everybody on that team that day. Normally there's some funny aspect to this, and besides George diving at me with a full cabinet, there isn't really much in this story. I guess the only thing to really say is thank you to everyone that was involved. Thank you so much.